Good morning, my name is Dan Welden, and I'm very happy to be here. And my role in life is basically as an artist, as a painter, as a printmaker, as an environmentalist, and as a person who really appreciates nature. I like going into the woods for inspiration. I like going into the landscape to see what kinds of lines and what kinds of forms strike me at the moment. And with that inspiration, I take it to my work, and sometimes I take my work to it, and I develop images. Okay? So my work evolved, actually, I've been painting and drawing for many, many years, and I really didn't know too much about how to get myself going as an artist. I did art, but I don't think I really had the label of being an artist until I developed something that was serious within my heart. Once that developed, I think that the journey of becoming an artist was much more successful. That first inspiration took place back in, actually, the day after Elvis Presley died. I was climbing up on a mountaintop in Norway, and it was a very, very rainy day, and I had foul weather gear on, and it was incredible. It was pouring, and I sat at the top of this mountain, and it was just an unbelievable feeling because the rain came down, and I opened up my eyes and let it hit my eyeballs, and I was eating blueberries. I was listening, feeling, tasting, everything. All five senses actually kicked in, and I saw a waterway down below through this torrential rain, and the waterway meandered from one part of my vision to the end. And I said, gee, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. I think I'd like to capture that. And that particular scene led me to 3 years worth of work, 3 years worth of waterway images. And I started using that imagery in two ways, with both hands. And I was drawing with my right hand and drawing with my left hand. And as I was drawing with both hands with black, there was a white space underneath coming through. And that was the waterway. That negative space was the waterway that captured my soul. That was the first inspiration. That lasted for 3 years, and then something else came along as I was digging in the earth, and I found an old 1939 New York World's Fair license plate. And I said, oh, gee, this is sort of interesting. And as a printmaker, I said, gee, I think I could print this. I think I could take that license plate, ink it up, put a piece of paper on top of it, and make a print. Well, I did, but that wasn't enough. I had to take it and use it as a stepping stone. With that as an image, I said, all right, let's see where we can take it. I didn't want to just do or reproduce a license plate. I wanted to do something with it. And so I drew and painted around it. And that led me to about 10 years worth of work with license plates and automobile mud flaps and things of that nature. Series of works that I was doing for those periods of time. Nothing else interfered. I remained true. I remained true to that theme. And then little by little other thoughts would come along. In fact, while I was working on those license plates, I was out in Santa Fe, or Albuquerque, New Mexico rather, and I was in a gallery, and a friend of mine had a photograph there, and it was really an interesting photograph. I looked at the photograph and I said, wow, that's something. That photograph is it's amazing. It looks like it's been altered in a dark room. And he said, no, that's the way it is. I said, no, it can't be. It couldn't be like that. And he said, no, that's the way it is. That's nature. And I looked at it more and more, and I got so intrigued with that mysterious cliff that I was looking at. It's an 800-foot tall cliff that was in northern Arizona in a place called Canyon Duchess. And Canyon Duchess is a very spiritual place with Native Americans, and I went I didn't go to visit it, but he gave me that photograph. But I didn't do anything about it at first, but after a while, it kept on teasing me. It kept on peeking out at me, and I said, oh, someday I'll do something with it. And I did a little sketch, and another one, and another one. And after 140 works, paintings, drawings, prints, I decided to visit Canyon de Chelly, and I went down into Canyon de Chelly, and I experienced another of the five senses came along. I took my shirt off, and I put my chest up against the stone wall, and I was eating an apple, heard the Navajo goats, and wrote a poem. And that inspiration lasted quite a few years longer. So things like that come through nature, whether it's digging in the earth or finding a wall, but it's always through nature somehow that it seems to come. Now these things happen. These forms of inspiration are not fleeting, they're commitments. And so some of them actually stay much longer than others. I took that theme of Canyon de Chelly with me to New Zealand, where I had a residency, and I said, oh, I've got plenty of work to do with this theme, but I was wrong, because when I got to New Zealand, there was another landscape, and I saw something very interesting. I saw a green hillside, and that green hillside had lines on it. They were going back and forth, back and forth. Unlike Canyon de Chelly, which went up and down, these went back and forth. But they were basically the same sorts of lines as I had seen in the rock face, except they were going this way. And I couldn't figure it out because they were on green, grassy slopes. And with raking light, the lines appeared. And I figured it out. It was from the sheep. New Zealand is very well known for its sheep. And they would trample down the grass. And at a distance, they had created these patterns, these lines. And I said, oh, they're gorgeous. That led to another series of many, many years of work. So that's sort of still carrying on in what I do now. Sometimes it's with a conscious thinking about Canyon de Chelly or the lines in New Zealand, or it could be anything in nature. Last week I was looking at the lines in rocks and a waterfall. And I thought, gee, I was painting and looking at that while I was working. You know, sometimes the theme becomes apparent, and sometimes it's not. And if I'm painting, for instance, in this particular canvas, we have those lines, we have those patterns. They're not exactly the same as what I saw at the time, nor is anything, because it's more of something that I feel at the moment as opposed to trying to recall what it looked like. I feel there's a certain discipline or structure that comes along while I'm painting. And talking about that, there's two parts to the painting, or two parts to any work that I do. And one is the emotional content, the emotional attachment to what I'm doing. And then the second one is the structure. So the emotional content is the feeling, is that what do I feel like doing? Where the structure is my academic training in art and the discipline that it takes to put what color is going to go to next to that color, or what am I going to do in terms of how am I going to make it move? How am I going to make the canvas work, or the painting or the drawing work? Oddly, one of the best things that has happened in my life actually is COVID. It's a very odd thing to say because of all the disasters and deaths and sicknesses and illnesses, but for me, it was a total immersion, the opportunity to be totally immersed in my art, because I isolated myself. I didn't go all over the place like I think the year before, I think I was away from my home for about 99 days. Now, 99 days is a lot. I was home for 99 days more than I had been the year before. So I didn't have to go anywhere. I said, oh boy, I found time. I didn't have to be on a plane. I didn't have to drive anywhere. I found the opportunity. The doors were opened to paint. So being a printmaker for many, many years, and all of a sudden shifting gears into the realm of painting, it was an amazing and a wonderful opportunity. Don Messick, a friend of mine in Santa Fe, said, Dan Welden's biggest mistake in his life was by becoming a printmaker. If he had become a painter right away, he would have had, instead of 1 documentary film done, 3 documentary films done. So it was sort of a left-handed compliment, but it was a beautiful statement that I appreciated very much. And we can't go back in time. I can't change what I've done. And I think, in reality, I think it took the years and years of the printmaking discipline to allow me to bring the pleasure of painting now. That's really the most pleasurable experience I've been having over the years. If I was a painter my whole life, it would still be going on the same way. And not that it would be the same old, because the paintings would be constantly changing, but the painting is now new again. I started out when I went to the Academy of Fine Art in Munich in 1969 as a painter. And then I discovered printmaking because of Kurt Lobosser. And he said, he dangled a carrot in front of me and he said, try this. And I could never really grab that carrot. And so I became that printmaker. And I became the person that I am, and have a bit of a reputation for making prints over the years. But now it's altering itself and becoming, not that I'm a different person, but I've got a different direction going on. I'll never stop making prints. I'll never stop teaching people how to make prints. But I really enjoy it all. I mean, that's I guess that's my problem. I enjoy everything so much. So many times people ask me, do you use music while you're working? Music to me is the most powerful of the arts. And the answer is yes, I use it, but no, I never use it at certain points. At certain points, I always use it. So it's interesting because music, being so powerful to me, can be soothing or distracting. If it's some sort of, if I'm listening to something that really takes hold of me, if I listen to Brubeck Take 5 or Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, that's something that I just cannot listen to at important moments, decision-making moments in my art, because they are such powerful pieces of music to me. So I have to have something much more subtle going on. It might have to be Vivaldi or something that is a little bit calmer and not as powerful. In any case, I love music so much, and when I'm working, sometimes my hands will work with, as though it's in a dance, as though I'm feeling this motion of the sound that's coming in. There's something that's very important that goes on when I'm in the creative process. And I don't paint or draw or make prints for other people. I don't do commission work. It's not that I can't, I just won't do it because my heart wouldn't be there. When I'm working on the art, nothing else exists. There's nothing except the art, the painting, the drawing, the instrument that I'm using. That's all that exists. We become one together. So if that truly happens, the art becomes genuine. If there's an interference of thought, for instance, if I said, I wonder who's going to pat me on the back for this. If I'm going to get a prize, how much am I going to sell it for? Whose sofa is it going to hang over? If all those ego-related thoughts enter my mind, it's going to put a little bit of a hindrance to the work. It's going to block a little bit for me. Other people might be different, but for me, the true art comes from the presence of the moment and being one with the work. So lines are typical in all of the work, and sometimes they're in a very minor fashion, sometimes they're delicate, and sometimes they're a little bolder. In these canvases, you can see the lines becoming quite apparent. There's also the edges that I'm concerned about. I think all artists tend to be different, but we want to be a little bit unique in how we approach things. Where many artists tend to go right for the center. And I tend to make a little bit of a void in the center and concentrate on the edges where people can go outwards as opposed to staying just in the center. So going beyond the borders is very important for me. So I think in all of the work, there's something that happens to the edges. I don't say all of the work, but there's something that really pops up with those edges. And we can see this spatial concept is important. And here the lines become quite strong, or more powerful than, say in this one, it's a little softer than that one. My latest painting is, so here's another instance where space is very important. And if one was capable of looking very close and seeing these very, very delicate lines, they're very important to me. You can't notice them at a distance, but the linear qualities come out of drawing. They come out of that very important aspect of making art, and that's drawing. Drawing is the basis for me, for my painting and for printmaking. So this is the most recent painting, and it's called Thunder from the Richard Strauss opera, which is a very beautiful piece of opera. I hadn't heard it before, and I was listening to it one day, and I was very influenced by it. And again, is where these particular lines, they became very playful for me. They became something that was not at all disciplined. It became very emotional. I can remember how I would feel in terms of just allowing my hand to just flow and dance with the canvas. So it's drawing and painting combined. So people say, well, what do you have in here? What kind of materials are you using? Well, first of all, this is not canvas. It's something called Evelon, which is a synthetic. It's made out of recycled bottles and bottle caps and things. And that was my canvas. And it works out very nicely because it's got a smooth finish. And it allows me to draw on top of that with a ballpoint pen. It allows me to draw or paint on it with a crayon. So I use crayons, I use paint, I use acrylic. Sometimes I'll use oils, but I don't use them to begin with. I'll use them on top of the acrylic. I paint and I draw and I work with acrylics, I work with oils, I work with crayons, I work with pencils, I work with pen and ink. I don't really know what I'm doing sometimes. I just pick up an instrument that's going to create a black mark or a yellow mark. It is so many, it's such a loaded question, like what do I use? I don't know what I'm going to use until that moment. I don't plan on doing an oil painting or a watercolor. I can do that, but something always comes along and says, oh, I think I'll have to use some charcoal in here because it's calling for it. It's a very interesting thing that work actually can speak to me, and I can speak to it, and I can respond to the work. There's an echo, and it sounds a little crazy, of course, because paintings don't say words, but it speaks to me in another language, and that language is called energy. So I feel the energy of the work, and the work receives my input, and that energy goes back and forth. And then, eventually the painting could be finished. People say, well, how do you know when you're finished? When it tells me. So sometimes people say, okay, where are you going with your art? What are you going to do? My friend Dick Mello, when I was a young artist, would say, where are you going with your art? And I would say, I don't know. And because I would be doing so many different things. And I still don't have a very defined answer as to a future. I know when I'm working on a project, it lasts for a long time. It lasts for years and years. And I'm so much involved in the present, in the presence, that I don't think too much in the future. That presence is so important. So at the moment, I feel like painting. My theme is there. My theme is in my heart, and it's going to come out continuously. I don't think I'll ever get exhausted. I'll get distracted, but I won't become exhausted from it. Something else might come along. It's like falling in love. We fall in love and something happens, and we get excited, and we dedicate ourselves to that love. And that love could be a person, it could be nature, it could be anything. It could be a relative, it could be a pet, it could be an animal. And that feeling is what's really important at that moment. So I bought a piece of land back in 1980-81, and it's right here in Sag Harbor in Noyak, and I didn't know what I was getting into because it was a $32,000 piece of property that was so much money, and I said, oh my gosh, how am I going to afford this? And the interest was 12%, and I was going through divorce and all this stuff, and I said, oh, how am I, and it was a little bit of a concern. And I said, I have to live in a place, I have to build a house someday, and in order to do that, how am I going to do that? So I had to say, I didn't have a job either. I didn't have, if we're trying to live from our artwork, we never know when our next painting or drawing is going to sell. So, or when a teaching gig would come along, which I really enjoyed, but I never really knew where my next money was going to come from. So I had to live and scrimp and save. And for 14 years, I lived without running water in my life. I lived in the woods, I lived illegally in a barn, I lived here and there, but in 14 years I saved $67,000. I said, well, so I can start building a house, and that's when it all started happening. I didn't finish the house with that money. It took me 6 years before I could finish my home. And then when I built it, I had a really cool space. It was beams and open, and to me, I come into my home at nighttime, or if I'm away, and I look at it, and every single time I enter my home, I say, wow, I have to say it's impressive to myself. And it feels good. It feels so good. So I can't stop building either. I love the idea of constructing and building and spaces. I built a little sauna, wood-fired sauna, and little stairways and rock walls and things like that, just because they're beautiful, and I like to put them together. I built a memorial made out of shovels, and shovels for the dead artists that I've known. And the shovel list gets longer and longer and longer because people continue passing. This is an etching press that took me 18 years to be able to afford to buy, and I finally received it this last year, and I'm able to do very large works. It's probably one of the largest presses in the country, and certainly one of the most beautiful presses. It has the capability of doing something 4 feet by 8 feet. It actually has a sound is nice. This represents this is a solar plate, something I did a few weeks ago in Santa Fe. I created the image on this light-sensitive plate, and I basically did a painting right on the plate, put it in the sun and exposed it, then brought it in, poured water on it and took a brush and brushed it. Wherever the light saw the plate, it hardened it. Wherever it didn't see it, it washed it away. So that became an etching. So with this plate, it enabled me to make a print from it. And that's what I did. I made a print from that plate. And I made another one. And I've actually made a whole series of these impressions, and this series are called monoprints. So there's no two alike. There are 10. This is my most recent work, and some people would call them prints, some people would call them paintings. It doesn't really matter what kind of label we put on them. Not to me anyway. They're all works on paper. But they're basically hybrid works on paper because they started out as a print and then were drawn and painted on top of them. And they became what they are. So each one is different and each one is unique. And that's how things evolve.